The Babylon Project was our last best hope for Scott. A self-contained podcast, 1 hour long, located on the internet. A place of fun and discussion for Babylon 5 fans everywhere. A shining beacon in cyberspace, all alone in the night. It was the dawn of the 20th anniversary of Babylon 5, the year the Great War to free Bab 5 came upon us all. This is the story of the last of the Babylon podcasts. The year is 2014. The name of the place is the Babylon Project Podcast.
This is Maggie Egan, your ISN news anchor, and you're listening to the Babylon Project podcast. Thanks for listening.
Hi there, Babylon 5 fans. This is the Babylon Project podcast, and I am Raul Weibera. I'm here with my co-host, Jim Arrowwood. How are you tonight, my friend?
Well, hello. I'm real good, and looking forward to this episode. This is going to be fun.
Well, yeah, folks, what we've decided to do tonight is we're not going to talk about Babylon 5. Instead, we're going to talk about Babylon 5. That's one way of putting it, right, Jim?
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine.
If that just confused the heck out of you, what it means is we are going to, rather than talk about a particular episode of Babylon 5, we're going to be having a feedback episode and talk about Babylon 5 with you. Sound good for you, Jim?
Sounds great. I think this is kind of overdue. We have had several people come back to us with some things. We've kind of been putting this off, and I think it's time to get caught up.
It's just been, how do I put it? Life intervenes. Yeah. Or life happens. I think we can say that and still be family friendly.
Yes.
All right. We're going to start off with an email from Mitch that goes all the way back to episode 1. Now, Mitch, you're going to have to forgive me here because I'm going to have to do a little bit of editing on the bits and pieces. There's a couple of things that are coming up in the future that we really didn't want to necessarily spoil. Well, you'll understand in a couple of episodes, in fact. All right. Hi, Jim and Raul. I just listened to the podcast, both the teaser and the episode for The Gathering. While I enjoyed most of it, part of me cringed with Raul. He said he drifted in and out of the first season, but later, the presidential election, Jim, is what he's going to nail me on. When the presidential election heats up, that's when he stuck around. Well, Mitch points out the election was in the very first episode, Midnight on the Firing Line. Yeah, Mitch, you're absolutely right there. That is the order I got those in. I did not, and I get this first episode until after I actually saw Survivors. So this has been one of those things that has been screwed up in my mind for, I guess, 20 years now. So you're right calling me on that. Now, Mitch goes on to talk about some really interesting stuff, in particular, Pat Tallman. Now, the original story that we heard was her availability. Mm-hmm. Mitch gives us some very interesting insights here that I did not know about. Okay, Mitch says Pat Tallman did not leave to pursue, quote, other opportunities, unquote, after the pilot. She discusses this in her memoir, Pleasure Thresholds. A certain executive with Warner Brothers took a, quote, liking to her and decided that her fate would rest on his casting couch. She declined his advances multiple times. When the producers of the series were signing the cast to the contracts for the first season, that executive intervened and prevented her from signing up. The deadline passed, and as far as JMS and the others at Babylonian Productions knew, she had decided to do something else. Hence the common thread about other opportunities. Okay. Back to Mitch. At that time, she was a regular member of the stunt team on Star Trek TNG. It wasn't until the beginning of Season 2 when Andrea Thompson informed JMS that she wanted to leave that he and Pat talked about it. He thought she'd walked away. She thought JMS didn't want her, even though he created the character specifically for her after seeing her in Night of the Living Dead. With that executive now gone, she agreed to come back for Talia's final episode. That led to her coming back as a series regular, starting with a third season. Wow.
Huh.
I had never heard that until I got this email from Mitch. I have not read that book.
You know,
had you heard of that at all before, Jim?
No, not in this particular instance, but I have heard the story before with other actresses. And, gosh, I'm telling you, that's really, really sick. It's too bad.
Yeah. All right. To continue, Jim mentioned that Tamlin seemed uncomfortable, stiff, and compared to her delivery, unfavorable with Claudia Christian. The version Jim saw was the original director's cut. The short version of this is the executives at Warner saw the pilot and decided she came off as too forceful, as a, quote, bitch, their words, and demanded that she redub her lines to soften her character. The softer version was in the original edit. When TNT came along and gave JMS the opportunity to re-edit the pilot, he used her original audio. Without exception, every scene shown in the TNT version was an alternate take from the director's version. It also includes new music and updated CGI, which we've known and discussed. Mm-hmm. If you haven't already done so, track down the movie's box set or the single disc that has The Gathering and In the Beginning. Either will contain the TNT edit. Almost all of the puppets are gone, and there's an entire subplot regarding Dust that does not appear in the original edit. Anyway, later on it was mentioned, he talks about Laurel and the line about boffing Marcus.
Right.
They would never have met in the original version. Laurel was a traitor. Okay. We know Laurel. We know that part about Laurel. We're going to skip that because this is something we specifically talk about on the final episode of the season. Mm-hmm. But we had talked about at some point, Jim, you're seeing the original version versus the remade version, I thought.
Yeah, and I have not seen the TNT version yet. What I saw was, I believe I found it on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, and it is certainly available still.
So I have the box set of movies. I've been saving those, though, for when we get through the series and we do the movies. So I might have to look in there and see if this TNT cut's in there.
It is because I've got the DVDs, and that's what I used. Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, if Mitch says it, it's got to be so.
Well, the truth is, I remember the movies and the DVDs. I remember the original and the TNT being different, but the truth is, I cannot remember the original broadcast version of.
Yeah, he's talking about. I think that would be the one with the puppets.
The only one I actually have any memory of was the TNT remake. Now,
I might have seen that at some point, but it would have been an awful long time ago, and I wouldn't have remembered it. So,
continuing on with some of the trivia that he's got here, which I think is very interesting stuff. Another change would have been the Carolyn, Catherine, Anna arc. It would have been Carolyn that went to the Sigma system, who then later found herself on Zahadum, and was then found inside a shadow crab to lure Sinclair to Zahadum. With Carolyn gone, Catherine was backdoored into that arc. When Michael O'Hare and Sinclair left after season 1, Carolyn/Catherine's arc backdoored over to Anna just as Sheridan took over Sinclair's arc. Every character, and this is something we've talked about before, every character without exception had at least 2 backdoor characters that could have stepped into their story arc. As for how Kosh was attacked with the poison, I believe Jim covered that one. Kosh and Valen/Sinclair were friends on Babylon 4. Kosh knows everything that Sinclair knew up until he took B4 back in time. With that knowledge, Kosh let himself appear sick. He can trick anyone into seeing what he wants them to see. We can see that for ourselves in Fall of Night. Did the machines actually register anything changing with his body, or did the characters just think that because of his prior knowledge of those events? It's pretty easy for someone who already knows what is coming to not take interest in the affairs of others. Yeah, good point.
Yep.
Good point, Mitch. I look forward to hearing what comes next. This isn't intended to be harsh. Nothing harsh there.
No, I don't.
I don't think anything.
No, not at all.
Especially for within the Babylon 5 fandom. It's like we love to sit there and just nitpick all the parts to death.
Yeah.
This isn't intended to be harsh, just to clear things up and maybe shed a little light on the series.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were excellent. You've heard us probably mention in the past episodes about our official Babylon 5 source of information. Well, that's
excellent.
Mitch.
Yeah, and hey, if it's not right, let us know.
One thing I am not is an absolute expert on anything. Okay. Midnight on the Firing Line is episode 2, and that's our next email. You want to take that one, Jim?
Okay. Joseph Fuller writes in, when you see the president of the EA, it was producer Douglas Netter. It is also hard for me to believe that one man wrote the whole series. The writing never dropped in the quality. And that's from Joe Fuller from down in North Carolina.
Yeah, that I think up until Babylon 5, the only series that had one writer writing as much of the series as JMS had done at that point was Blake 7. And Joe passed that up with this series. And I don't think any series has done it since either. I don't know if anyone would want to put themselves through that. But he wrote about half of season 1, I thought. Almost all but a couple, 1 or 2 episodes of seasons 2, 3, and 4. And likewise, most, I don't remember the exact, but most of season 5. So it was an amazing feat. Plus all those scripts that he didn't write, he did editing and pulled in some of the B-story stuff too, as I understand. So it was a lot of work. This has been a while, but from Matt Lathram. Hi, I found your podcast via the Facebook group. I used Dogcatcher on my Android and couldn't find the podcast through its search function, so I added the RSS URL. Unfortunately, it shows generic WordPress.com gray graphic for the logo. Is that something you are able to fix in the feed? I know I did a little bit of tweaking on the RSS, Matt. I haven't heard any other responses on this at this point. So if there are problems, if anyone's catching us over on Android devices, do me a favor and let me know. I know iTunes has been tweaking the requirements for the graphic, so I don't know if it's something connected with that or if I need to change the resolution or what. Anyway, Matt continues. Thanks for starting up a new podcast on my favorite TV show.
Our pleasure.
It's ours too. Okay, Jim, go ahead and take Mitch from Omaha's episode 2 feedback for us.
All right. It says from Mitch, okay, now, this is just fun. I love hearing about Spoo. In my area, there is a station that shows episodes of He-Man in the wee hours on Sunday mornings. I'll record them and watch them later. Well, actually listen to them playing while I'm doing housework or work on the computer. Anyway, I noticed last week King Rander was eating Spoo. I had to rewind it to make sure that I heard it correctly. I did. Then when I went back to the beginning, the episode was written by JMS. It makes me wonder how many other series he's included Spoo in. There are two pretty major events from this episode that did not get covered in your discussion. The first was the presidential election. The actor playing Santiago, and who later provides the voice for the president, was executive producer Doug Netter. The actor playing his challenger, Marie Crane, was the series costume designer, Anne Bryce. I hope I said that correctly. The second was the introduction of Jane, the ISN anchor. Surely the first appearance of the star of the series should rate at least a mention in your review, right?
Hey, we've got Jane as a part of our show every episode now.
Yes.
So,
and I'll tell you what, Mitch, you helped to bring her to Ozfest last year, and I'll tell you what, just one of the most awesome people I have ever met. And thank you for doing that and helping me get an interview too. I appreciate that.
Oh wow! The He-Man bit, I forgot he was involved in He-Man at all. You know, when I was in college in the 80s, we used to get together for group watches of He-Man and Masters of the Universe.
Oh, no kidding.
No kidding.
I think my son watched.
I just.
My son watched He-Man. I don't think I ever really got into it myself.
We did it mostly for the mocking factor. Thank Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go ahead and take this next one from Parliament of Dreams. This is also from Joseph Fuller, and as I said, it's on Parliament of Dreams. This episode was the one that set the hook in me for Babylon 5. I know JMS is an atheist, but yet his writing shows he understands the ways of a believer. When Sinclair shows the dominant form of religion, it's great. It shows that even in the future, the humans do have their need for a god. Parentheses, that's my thought. You know, I've said this before. Well, first of all, Jim, do you know for sure, is he atheist or agnostic?
To tell you the honest to goodness truth, I'm not positive. My guess is I think he's atheist, but I'm not positive.
Okay. I do know he had been to seminary. I thought his background was specifically Catholic, and I'm not sure, but yeah, he's got an amazing sensitivity to religion in general.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he has a certain appreciation for others' beliefs. I mean, open-minded person who isn't threatened by others' beliefs. That what else could you say about a person? They're going to acknowledge that there are people who do believe differently than him.
Yeah, and like I said, I've just the amount of respect that he gives.
Oh yeah, and
it just really impressed.
And not just religiously, but culturally also.
Yes, very, very true.
Colin, all the way from England, wrote into us, and it says, "Hi, Raul and Jim. I just wanted to drop you a line and say how much I am enjoying your podcast. I was going to do a Babylon 5 podcast, having recently completed my rewatch. But after hearing your cast, I see I don't have to. The format and
I disagree. Sorry.
The format and interaction is great, as it is the little trivia bits that you throw in as you go along. You work well together, and even though you beat me to the punch on the podcast front, I hope your numbers and feedback continue to grow. I would raise a point, though, on your website. You may want to add your Twitter handles and or Gmail to the show notes. This way, if someone Googles you and gets directed to your website, the contact details are there. People who stream rather than download are more likely to feedback as they already are at the computer or generic internet device. Keep up the good work, guys, and I hope you'll cover the movies and Crusade after. It'll only take you about 5 years. Live long and podcast. Now, I'm just going to mention that Colin is a podcaster in his own right on the Trek FM groups of podcasts. He's on a bunch of them. He really, really knows his stuff on Star Trek. And I'll tell you what, I'm kind of glad we're not competing with this guy.
Oh, good heavens,
yeah, he'd be a tough one.
But he is an absolute gentleman across the board.
Yes. He started the Trek News and Views podcast quite a while back, and I got in listening on right from the very first episode, and you could hear how not only he warmed up to it and improved over time, and so did his equipment improve over time. And so right now he's got a very professional sound with his podcasts, and the guy just knows his stuff, or at least he knows where to find the information. So
I'll have to double check the website, because I thought, our Twitter handles may not be there. I'm pretty sure the Gmail is.
Okay.
That'll be something that we'll have to double check, because that is good advice.
Yes.
And yeah, we're planning to cover the movies. We're planning to cover Crusade. We'll even cover Legend of the Rangers. And at least at this point, we are planning to cover the books, especially since Jim has now read Legions of Fire.
I've read 4 of them, as a matter of fact.
The only problem will be for many of you, if you have not got your own copy of the 3rd Legion of Fire book, it's going to be difficult to find. You'll need to check with your library, most likely, or pay a ridiculous amount of money for one of the few copies that can be found elsewhere. No idea why they have not brought this up. If you listen to the Sci-Fi Diner, you've heard Colin there as well.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
He calls in a lot.
Okay. Jim, I'm going to read this one for you.
Okay.
This is a short one from Mike, and it is regarding Babylon Project Special 001, an ISN special report. Yes. A very entertaining interview with Maggie, who played a small but very significant role on B5. Her character's return after the war was a remarkable scene. Oh, yeah.
And as I said, I got to meet this lady, Maggie Egan, at Ozfest in Omaha last August. What a nice person. Sat in on a couple of panels that she was on, and managed to get about 20 minutes to sit down and visit with her, and just a lot of fun to talk to. Now, the funny thing is listening to her talk about Babylon 5, is she doesn't know a great deal about the show, because she would get a phone call, we want you to come in, we need Jane. She'd go in, shoot her stuff, and then leave. So what's really funny is to hear her talk and say what she knows about Babylon 5, she has learned from us, the fans, through the various conventions and things that she's gone to. Yeah, just an incredible person.
She sounded in the interview like a true lady.
Oh, yeah. And I certainly hope that I have another opportunity to sit down and visit with her again.
Okay. The War Prayer. We have several pieces of feedback that came across that episode. Do you want to take Mike?
Sure. He's by the way, Mike is one of our Twitter followers. He says, this is on War Prayer. Enjoyed the episode as always, and that was the first time I've heard of let alone listen, read Twain's War Prayer. And yes, I don't think the society of the time were ready for it, and alas, I fear nothing much has changed.
Yeah. Unfortunately, looking at the world today, it seems I would not disagree with him at all there.
Well, I think it's a recurring theme throughout history.
Which is one of the reasons I think that Babylon 5 just kind of stands the test of time.
Oh, yeah.
He's taking on the human condition. Now, for those who may not remember, the war prayer was read. I got to brag about her.
Okay,
Jim. The war prayer was read by my wife, Anthea. She's got a fantastic voice, in my opinion. She's also the lady who has done the opening and closing voiceovers for us. Also on the war prayer, we have this from Joseph Fuller again. This episode made me respect Londo more and see he is more than the fool he shows at first. When Londo starts to remember the past, the weight on him is so great. This is the Home Guard's first outing, and it shows that we as humans are still so prejudiced. That is what makes sci-fi so great. It can toss out an idea and talk about it and not cause people to freak out.
Yeah.
Amen.
Although, I'll tell you what, anymore, people do freak out all the time. Tell you what, all you have to do is put up a 90-second trailer with a robot rolling on top of a basketball, and you're going to have people going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, people are definitely getting too thin of skins, I think. You know, another thing to note, and this is kind of stepping ahead a few episodes, but what we see here in War Prayer, we see reflected by the other alien races in TKO. So it's not just humans, it's a sword that swings both ways.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is.
Okay, the next email that we have, Jim, I'll let you take, is from Christopher Waits.
Christopher is another faithful follower on Twitter.
Just before you start reading, Chris is known as Lost Weather Guy on Twitter. He's not a Facebooker at all, but he and I go all the way back to Lost on Wayne Henderson's show.
And he's a really good supporter, and I like hearing from him all the time. Anyway, he says, "Hey, Raul and Jim, I just wanted to send a quick word and say a great job you are doing, as I knew you would. As you know, I just finished B5 earlier in the year and wasn't planning on an immediate rewatch. However, this is a great excuse to do so. It is also the perfect pace for those who find the podcast later on or fall behind. What you have done most well so far is refer to later events in the series vaguely enough to not spoil them, or to not spoil newcomers, but obvious enough to make it apparent for those of us who have watched the whole series. A few points on my mind. Shouldn't BAB5 transmissions be digital in 2257? Yeah. Communications going slowly the analog way rather than pixelating seems strange now. Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah, it does.
But you know, in order to enjoy the show, you do have to somewhat suspend your disbelief. Let's see. Which is your favorite opening theme? Mine is definitely Sinclair's. It was the dawn of the third age of mankind, of season 1. I don't think the other seasons ever match its elegance. Can't remember if you discussed the reason for the name Babylon. Of course, biblically, it was the spot where mankind wanted to exalt themselves by building a tower to the heavens, but God stops them by confusing the languages. Later it would come to represent idolatry and pride. Interesting that the space station exists in the heavens, second heaven at least. I'd like to think the name is a nod to various races working together, but needing to depend on the higher power to avoid the pitfalls of their past troubles. Finally, I find that I am enjoying all the characters more on second watch. Jakar definitely always had depth, and it is remarkable how that actor conveys so much expression on his countenance despite all the makeup. Delenn I actually prefer more now in this form, probably a minority viewpoint, Mira Furlan, just as in Lost, portrays eccentric very well. Oh, almost forgot. Wanted to hear your thoughts on this. And he posts that JMS is talking or has talked about
announces Babylon 5 feature reboot.
Yeah, reboot. Sounds like a terrible idea to me. Don't mess with or add what was near flawless execution. All right, keep up the good work. Chris in Kentucky.
Yeah. Okay, we can go back and hit this in a few different points. The first one I wanted to touch was his comment about not spoiling the show. You know, that is such a hard line to walk because the way the show is constructed, it's like you can't avoid talking about stuff that's going to be happening in a few episodes.
Right.
But like I said, it's you kind of want to put off parts of it because you want to be able to do the refer back as well.
Oh, yeah. And
so I'm glad we get a positive response from that.
I often wonder, are we saying too much about what we know, what's coming up? But also it helps us to tell people, hey, watch for this, pay attention to this point because it's going to be very important down the road a little bit.
Just because of the nature of the show, we're not going to promise. Oh, well, we're spoiler welcome, but we try to avoid, if you can follow me when I say the distinction between spoilers and ruiners.
Exactly.
Okay, you wanted to talk about his comment about opening themes.
Yeah, I kind of like them all. They kind of fit, but I think, the season 4 one that is pieced together with all of the characters having a little bit to say, I kind of like that one myself. But I like them all. Season 1, though, is really neat. I would have to say that it is a very close second because that voice, you just can't beat that voice.
This is one spot where I strongly suspect I'm in the minority. My favorite is still season 2.
Okay.
And no, Bruce Boxleitner does not match Michael O'Hare's pipes. I won't deny that at all. But it's more concise. The conciseness of it just kind of fits into the Babylon 5 theme for me a little bit better. But again, I would still say it's probably the O'Hare intro is the very close second for me. But like I said, I from what I've seen of the fandom, I'm pretty sure I'm in the minority there. And as far as the reason for the naming, I think his theory there behind the naming makes sense to me. I think another possibility might very well be, though, and again, it's a biblical connection, but Babylon, the Hanging Gardens, the center of the center of the Babylonian Empire, one of the first great empires of the Middle East too. Characters, I will say this: the characters get deeper every time you watch it, Chris.
You get a little bit more and a little bit more all the time.
And Delenn in Minbari form being the favorite is not a minority viewpoint. It's not necessarily a majority viewpoint either, but it is certainly not a minority viewpoint. Okay, and what he wraps it up with, what do you think? Good idea, bad idea on a reboot?
I'll tell you what, I don't think that it should be a reboot. Let's do another story.
I almost get the feeling that when Joe says reboot, it is not necessarily reboot in the traditional sense.
Okay.
Just from the things I've read about it, I cannot think of anyone who could reprise Delenn's role.
No.
When you think of reboot in that kind of a traditional
And
sense.
you'll never find someone to play Garibaldi like Garibaldi does.
Or Jakar.
Yeah. And there's no, that kind of reboot I would be completely against. Now, if we get a new story, something different, new characters, news story, whatever it is, heck yeah, I'd love more Babylon 5 in some form. Just not trying to remake what we already have. I don't know about you, but it just seems like everything coming out of Hollywood is a reboot or a prequel.
I am sick of reboots.
How many times have they rebooted Spider-Man? How many times have they rebooted Batman? Come on.
Exactly. And like I said, I don't think Straczynski intends a reboot necessarily in that traditional sense. Maybe a revival.
Yeah.
I know what a lot of fans have been wanting is to see new CGI cleanup and a reissue on Blu-ray. Sort of like they cleaned up and did new special effects for Star Trek the original series. Now, that I would love to see. I don't know what the chances of that ever happening are, though. Okay, where are we? All right, it's my turn, I believe. This is an email from Dennis Green. Dennis writes to us, Raul and Jim, just a quick note to let you know how much I am enjoying the show. When I first watched the show in the 90s, I never had anyone to talk about it with, and there were times I felt like I was going to burst. I can relate to that. Without any other fans nearby, I had to grow my own. As soon as my sons were old enough to appreciate B5, I bought the DVDs and indoctrinated them, which was better, but still not like being able to thoroughly analyze them with other adult fans. But listening to your show every couple of weeks is like the discussion group I never had. I have always felt that the first season was pretty slow, but rewatching it now with you, I am picking up a lot I didn't previously.
Me too.
Put me in the camp of those hoping you can increase the frequency of the episodes. We're working on it. I know you are both busy guys, but at the rate we're going, I'm afraid we'll be celebrating the 30th anniversary of the series before we're done. I sure hope not. I especially enjoyed the discussion about Sinclair and the hole in his mind during Episode 9 of The Sky Full of Stars. This is probably too spoilery to get into now, but regarding the issue of humans being born with Minbari souls, I have always wondered if what was actually happening when Sinclair was captured during the Battle of the Line was that the Triluminary reacted to Valen's (Sinclair's) DNA, which after 1,000 years would have been present in many of his Minbari descendants as opposed to a more metaphysical explanation, which makes the coincidence of the Minbari capturing the one human who would share so much DNA with today's Minbari very interesting. Anyway, I am very much looking forward to your discussion on that when we get to Season 3, sometime in 2018. Just kidding. Fabulous job. Keep up the great work, Dennis. All right, Dennis. Thank you. Gosh. If we're still doing this in 2018, it's probably because JMS does have a resurrection of the show.
Yeah, that would be nice. Okay, yeah.
What about his triluminary theory?
Yeah, I could certainly understand that. And the circular idea here going along with this, and then after reading, of course, To Dream in the City of Sorrows, makes that very plausible.
And, okay, you gave me the opening, Jim.
Oh, no.
If you haven't read To Dream in the City of Sorrows, you need to get it and read it.
Yeah.
That book, at least, is an easy one to find.
And not only that, it picks up right where Season 1 drops off.
It does, but I would still suggest waiting until midway through Season 3.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
Marcus.
Yeah, maybe because of Marcus, but no, I disagree, because this sets up Marcus's arrival, okay? And it shows how...
While this will be a agree to disagree thing, because while I absolutely concede your point, I get a feel, there's sort of a assumption of knowledge about Marcus in the book.
Yeah.
That the fans are already familiar with.
Yeah. But the thing is you also you find out why Marcus is the way he is and how he got to where he is. And it's a very compelling story. I would say that it sets up the entrance of Marcus in season 3.
I guess it's sort of a which way you want to go. Do you want to have that background laid out for Marcus before you get to the character? Or do you want to have that familiarity with the character and then have those curtains of his past opened up for you?
Though, for me, after reading the book, after watching the series several times, it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. The book is so well written.
All that matters is you read the book.
Yeah. The book is so well written, it's not going to spoil Marcus's entrance in season 3.
True. Like I said, I agree with you on the basic facts.
Yeah. It's a great book, though. Really, really really good book to read, and it is canon.
It is canon. Okay, we have feedback from Mitch on Survivors, if you want to take that one first.
Okay. Well, apparently Mitch is answering a question we asked, and I can't remember what it is. But at any rate.
My question was a question for me whether or not Kimmer was on Earth Force One. I was wondering what happened to her.
Quick answer, according to Mitch, is no. Kimmer was not on board Earth Force One at the end of the season, per JMS. She is also not mentioned again in the series, nor do I recall any references to her in any of the books. So you can probably imagine whatever fate you'd like for her. So, okay, I do remember the question. And,
and I know she hasn't shown up. She didn't, like I said, she was one of the characters that I missed not seeing again most.
Yeah. So my assumption would be that Kimmer was very simply a character who helped us to understand Garibaldi better. And reveal some plot background on Garibaldi.
Yep. All right. TKO is, well, we have actually several pieces of feedback. Troy Rudder writes to us, I want to hear Raul sing the Rocky theme song.
No, you do not.
Great episode as always.
No.
This is one of the episodes I have seen the least over the years.
No.
I read this one to Anthea. She says to tell you, no, you don't.
Yeah, I'm with that.
There is a reason that I am a sound man. Basically, it puts me as far away from any open mic as possible. My wife was one of the top music educators in Los Angeles County during the 90s, during that stint where we lived there. She took a choir from 6 people to 80 in Palmdale. I am the only person in over 30 years of her teaching music that she has ever classed as unteachable, as far as vocal is concerned.
I think that's why he put the little winky face there in the email.
You know, Jim, of the pair of us, Jim's got the golden pipes. I've got a terrible voice.
And as far as singing is concerned, you can't afford me. I think union scale's $85 an hour or something like that. So,
well, it depends on the location.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, you want to go ahead and take Evelyn?
Sure. Evelyn C. Raymond says on this same episode, TKO, so happy to know that there are still fans of this show out there who are producing new stuff about the series. I actually enjoyed this episode for the insight it gave into Ivanova's character. Never did get the macho fight thing, but then again, I'm a woman. Okay. The macho fight thing. Well, that was just
Rocky. Blood sport.
And the man was trying to get
Testosterone.
The man was trying to get back into the game. Basically, is what that was all about.
Yeah. Like I've said, this, we've both been on right. It's not the favorite. It's solid standalone, but it really was the highlight of the episode. I thought was the Ivanova stuff.
Yeah.
Though the way they kind of flipped back and forth between Shiva and the fight, that was really, I thought, was a good piece of artistry.
Oh yeah. To compare the conflicts and the internal and external and those kinds of things. Yes.
All right, Dallas pipes in on this episode as well. I'm sorry to say, but this is probably my least favorite episode of season 1. I've never really understood why this episode was made. Perhaps it was for additional character development, or perhaps J. Michael just likes mixed martial arts. I've actually got some friends who fight mixed martial arts, but I think he's got it. In particular, Susan, the character development with Susan and her father.
There was resolution there for Susan. Also, there was that little bit there where Walker Smith tells Garibaldi, you need to learn to watch your back, which gets really important later on.
Yeah. That little tidbit, definitely.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to find out that the entire episode, or I should say that entire storyline, was built around
just being able to give that line.
Showing that Garibaldi has a tendency to slip every now and then. Yeah.
True. We actually have another email on TKO as well.
Yes, I see that.
From Dennis Green. You want to take that one,
Dennis
Jim?
writes, Raul and Jim, another great show this week. I agree that TKO is not the strongest episode of the season, but you guys brought out several really good discussion points that made it worth rewatching.
Wow,
yes.
Thanks.
You covered the Ivanova plot completely. No comments other than great analysis. And I missed the Harlan Ellison thing completely. I'll have to go back and watch it again. 2 things that I thought of while listening. I noticed the coincidence that the ship Smith and Rabbi came in was called the White Star. Probably no, White Star Line was a British ship company in the 1800s, and that the Titanic was part of the White Star Line. Yeah.
Yep.
My theory is that JMS wanted to hint at the passenger lines that run in the B5 universe are descended from the cruise lines we know on Earth today. Then later, when he decided his battleship would be called the White Star, either forgot or decided it didn't matter enough to let go of the name he wanted.
I think that was more of a case of the latter.
And then number 2, you brought up a larger question that I found very interesting regarding the alien who was upset about Smith getting in the Mutai and then tried to sabotage him. You acquainted it with an alien version of the Earth First movement. Maybe. But I got to thinking about how the other races, particularly the non-aligned worlds, might view Earthers. So 10 years ago, Earth was just venturing out into space. We know from the prequel movie that the Centauri were the first alien race that Earth encountered. There's a scene where Malari offers, in essence, to take Earth under Centauri's wing to help them. And then war between Earth and the Minbari, arguably one of, if not the most powerful race around, incredibly Earth wins. Now, a backwater planet with technology outmatched by any other races is vaulted into a leadership position. I bet this ticked off a lot of races who resented Earth's new status. I'm sure there were a lot of Earth sports broadcast to B5, to the detriment of other events. Think of the difference in coverage in the U.S. between football and soccer. It's not surprising some aliens would want to keep Earthers out of our stuff. JMS never had time to get too deep into this, but it might have made some interesting fodder. Anyway, awesome work as always. Looking forward to the next one. Thanks, Dennis.
That makes
Yeah.
sense to me. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. I think on the White Star, it was probably, a tip of the hat to the White Star line. And with the fighter, the White Star itself, I think it was the contrast to the Black Star, and it didn't matter, as he suggested, it didn't matter.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think Dennis nailed it on the sensitivity of some of the league races regarding BAP 5, or regarding
no
humans.
doubt.
And last but not least on this large load of feedback from Joseph Fuller again on Grail. Grail showed me that ideas that we as humans think are myths, aliens think is worthy of respect.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, makes sense.
Well, and I think that would be akin to the old saying that a prophet is never accepted in their own country.
Yep. And, this also reflects the kind of respect that JMS, that we talked about just a few minutes ago, about JMS and his respect for different beliefs.
The only problem is Aldous was not respected by the humans as much as he was the other races. The humans actually kind of made fun of him.
Yeah.
But,
though, as the episode went on, we saw the inner strength of someone like Gaich.
And that brought Jinxo / Thomas out, set an example, and it was probably as Delenn said, it isn't about finding the object. It was about the search. And I know, I don't know about you, Raul, but I'm sure that you have, if nobody else has, that when you want something so badly, and you want it and you want it and you want it for a long time, and then all of a sudden you get it, and you don't feel as satisfied as you expect that you will. So
yeah, exactly. Well, my friend, that's all our feedback.
A lot of
all
feedback. Our feedback up to date.
Yeah, that was a lot of feedback, but we've got to give some feedback to all of our fans, and especially to some people that have been supporting us. Jim, you in particular had some call-outs and some thank yous you wanted to make sure got
I sure
mentioned.
Do. On Facebook, I asked several groups and various pages if we could post our episodes as we release them on their pages, and I just wanted to say some thank yous to those. There is the Babylon 5 page that is run by Kaz Vorpal. Thank you, Kaz. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate the support and the help.
And I have to say, I've loved participating in that forum now.
Another Babylon 5 page being run by Dave Spring. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And then there's one of my favorites, Sandra Bruckner's The Zocalo Today group there on Facebook is nice. And she is very supportive and in contacts once in a while. The Sci-Fi Nerds have allowed me, and Crystal Davis takes care of that group on Facebook. And
thank you.
Thank you so much. And then we get shout outs and things like crazy on Twitter also. Lots of retweets.
Yeah, I am not as active on Twitter as I used to be.
But in our next feedback show, I intend to gather some information from the Twitter page.
And there are quite a few podcasts that have said nice things about us as well.
Yes, I know who you're talking about. Let's shout out to Wayne Henderson and all his wonderful work. Troy Heinrichs.
And all of his wonderful works. Troy, the Dune Saga podcast, and the Sci-Fi Diner with Scott Herzog.
Miles and M.
And Miles and M. The Sci-Fi Christian with Ben DeBono has given us some kind words as well.
Yeah, I found that out. Who else? Well, Troy Rudder, of course. He always talks about us and retweets us. Hank Davis
over at the Marvel with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So yeah, we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to all of you folks.
And if we've left you out, it sure isn't intentional. We will get it gathered together and say thank yous and shout outs again.
Wow. We've got to do this a little more frequently.
Yes, definitely.
Especially as we're getting more feedback, you notice in the later episodes.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much we had.
Well, folks, this has been a very fun hour for me. Sometimes it's still like, wow, people actually listen to us? I mean, for us, for Jim and I, and, he has said this himself, and I completely agree with him. If the only people listening to the podcast were he and I, we'd still be doing this show. For us, this is... It's an act of love for the show. So thank all of you, and do keep stuff coming in. We will certainly not make some of you wait so long before you get mentioned and thanked on air.
Yes, sir. That's correct. We'll have to keep up a little bit better.
I also want to thank the folks who have given us the 5-star reviews on iTunes. I know Chris Waits, I know Wayne Henderson, and I know there's been several others. Unfortunately, I can't access iTunes right now. So I'm going to ask if your name was not mentioned to please forgive us, but do keep the positive reviews coming. Those help get the show noticed and show up a little higher on the searches. Well, anything else you'd like to add tonight, Jim?
No, not really. I think we've got this one about covered for the time being, and so I'm ready to say goodnight because I have an early day tomorrow.
And I'm ready to say no boom today.
No boom today? Will there be boom tomorrow?
Boom tomorrow. There's always a boom tomorrow.
Good night.
Good night, folks.
Podcast terminated. Thank you for listening to the Babylon Project podcast. You can email Raul and Jim at the Babylon Project podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at the Babylon Project Podcast. On the internet, we are at babylonprojectpodcast.wordpress.com. To subscribe to the podcast, you can find us on iTunes, or you can subscribe to the RSS feed on the webpage.